Okay, and welcome. We're going to do a little run through of how to complete an assessment plan. This forms part of your evidence for the TAEASS 402, 401, and also can be used for creating assessment tools later. So we use the plan when we're referring to a plan in the TAEASS502 unit as well. So let's, without any hesitation, get started. A lot of this is very self-explanatory, and we do have a completed example in your kit that shows one that's filled out, but creating one is a little bit different. So unit code and title, that's pretty straightforward. This is the unit of competency title from the unit that is on training.gov.au. Okay, so you look on the side here, I've just chosen the TAEASS 401, so you would simply put that into your code, and you'd also put the title and release. Now you put the release in there simply because you want to make sure that the plan refers to the most recent version of the unit. The assessor name's you, except your fingers probably work on the keyboard. Candidate group is the cohort that you're assessing. Now you tick if it's an RPL, in which case you'd be looking at the evidence requirements down here. Or you'd leave it blank, and we're just going to be filling out this side. Now when it talks about the element of competency, now you can quite literally take the elements from the unit of competency on training.gov as your starting place. You can get more detailed and go all the way down to the performance criteria. Of course, these are going to have to be contextualized, and by that I mean if you look at the very first one here, it says identify the candidate and confirm the purposes and context of the assessment with relevant people according to organizational requirements. So who are relevant people and what is the organizational requirement? So you need to contextualize that to make it more sensible for the particular cohort. Anyway, let's move away from that for a moment and look at just filling out this basic one for assessment purposes. So we're going to just keep it at the element level and pop the first one in over here. Now we get to choose the assessment method. Now you've probably had a thought about this beforehand, but this is where you actually fill out the information. So let's just quickly go over it. If you're determining the assessment approach, this can be, well, the evidence can be gathered, I should say, simply by using documentation from a workplace. You don't need to observe them. You could do some sort of simulation or role play to do this, but it would be very time consuming and probably not very handy for the candidate. So let's leave it at some sort of workplace documentation. Now if you look down to our assessment methods down the bottom here, that simply means it could be something like written questioning, like a project, or it could be a portfolio. So a portfolio is a collection of documentation, usually from a workplace. So when we're determining anything within a unit of competency, there's always going to be two components, the knowledge and the skill. Now in this case we're going to determine the skill by the portfolio, and the knowledge we're going to determine by questioning. So over here we'd simply put an X in the box there and an X in the box there. Now we can go ahead and complete that for all the elements. And there you have it. Now this is very basic, as I said, and it's just for assessment purposes at this stage. You could delve further into this and think of a way of observing performance in a workplace, etc. But anyway, let's continue. So we want to go further down the assessment plan document now and look at this area here, the workplace health and safety considerations. As an assessor, when you're conducting assessment, you must make sure that the assessment takes place in a safe environment. This is also highlighted on the bottom of your unit of competency under assessment conditions. It says the conditions that are safe and which are typical of those experienced in the training environment. So if this is happening in a workplace or in a simulated environment where you are going to assess the person in person, then you need to make sure it is safe and you need to put some considerations in here. If, however, you're sending them back to a workplace to simply do it themselves, then you don't. You simply refer to the venue's risk assessment processes. And that's it, really. So this is about as far as you'd need to go if it's being assessed external to your direct observation, if that makes sense. Now, if we scroll down, we look at the assessment methods we're going to use. Now, we've got observation here. Now, we're not going to be doing that, so we'd remove that. But we do have questioning and we do have a portfolio. So what kind of instruments might you use for questioning? Well, you can have a short answer questionnaire. Now, why would we have a short answer questionnaire? Well, if we look over here at the knowledge evidence on the unit of competency, some of these things require more than just a tick and flick. So obligations of an assessor under applicable legislation. That's going to be a question that requires a bit of an answer. Now, this is a level 4 unit, so you'd expect a decent answer, maybe a paragraph or two, to cover off all of the knowledge evidence. Now remember, to be a valid assessment, we have to capture all the evidence required both under the performance evidence and the knowledge evidence, as well as meeting the foundation skills and all of the elements and performance criteria. So it's quite involved. Now the portfolio, we're going to use a portfolio to gather evidence as well. Helps if I can spell, just realised it. I really can't spell, not today anyway. Okay, so if we have a look over here, we can pop in this wonderful thing called a portfolio checklist. Now, what do you think that is? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like it is. A portfolio checklist is a checklist that the candidate can use to gather the evidence, the appropriate evidence that they've been required to do in the workplace. It's also very helpful for the assessor to make sure they've covered everything. Now, we can put a bit more detail into that if we wish. However, for the purpose of assessment, we'll leave that as it is, but also check the sample or example assessment plan for other options here. The benchmarks, well, the unit of competency we're using is not this one. It's the one at the top of the assessment document. So we can be a bit sneaky and just simply copy and paste that down to here. And to make sure we meet the conventions of writing these things, we'd better ensure we have both the code and the title next to it. Documentation, well, we're going to have a portfolio checklist, not an observation checklist. We're also going to have the short answer test or questionnaire, and we're going to have the assessor marking guides. Now, the marking guides are dead important in any assessment tool. Why? Because without them, we cannot ensure some sort of consistency in marking, which goes against the rules of evidence. Okay. Next here you see the timeline for assessment. How long is it going to take? Now if we go over to our assessment conditions on the unit of competency, we'll see here that it just says typical of those experienced in the training and assessment environment. So therefore it doesn't give you exactly how long it takes to gather this evidence. You might want to gather some of the evidence during a workshop and some post-workshop via the portfolio of evidence, in which case you would enter that in here. I'll just pop a couple of notes in here. The observed evacuation process again refers back to the health and safety conditions and doesn't apply here. Okay, knowledge assessment, verbal question to confirm. Well, we're not doing verbal, we're doing short answer questions. For knowledge alone. Reporting arrangements, this is what the RTO does with the information from the assessment. So it'll be gathered and forwarded into the training administration for marking. When complete, the competency will be entered into the staff training record, or maybe the student training record, and follow up with confirmation of competency email with administration. Okay. Plans prepared by you, signed by you, approved by your senior assessor and or your RTO manager, and then signed by them. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the very basics of filling out an assessment plan. Good luck.